Humans have two worlds. The objective world consists of other people, objects, traditions, economic and social institutions, and natural conditions around a person. This objective world is referred to as the environment or external reality. The other is the subjective world, which defines a person's internal and unique content. The subjective world cannot be observed externally and often remains inaccessible to the individual's own consciousness. We live in a culture founded on success. You are considered successful if you have a good job, earn a lot of money, live in a nice house, and own a nice car. Western culture, oriented towards success, emphasizes the external world and its realities. This focus often hinders us from seeing our own reality, or inner world. Many people who consult professionals for psychological issues are disconnected from their inner worlds. One of the primary goals of these professionals is to bridge this disconnect between the inner and outer worlds. To achieve this, they continuously yet flexibly guide people to explore their inner worlds. This is crucial because once a person understands the power of this unexplored world, they reach a point of no return. Once a relationship with the unconscious is established, it becomes a lifelong mode of being, transforming a person's values. Once this change begins, there is no turning back. Understanding oneself is more important than self-actualization because one must know themselves before they can truly self-actualize. However, many people today try to add meaning to their lives without making an effort to understand themselves, hoping for a miracle to find themselves. Therefore, the first step should be to make an effort to know oneself. Here, I pose some questions. Who are you? What is the I? Who is the person you see in the mirror every day? At this stage, we will benefit from the views of Sigmund Freud, the founder of psychoanalysis. According to the theory developed by Freud, our personality consists of three main systems: the id, ego, and superego. Let's examine these processes together. The id is the basic system of personality. The ego and superego develop as separations from it. The id includes all the inherent psychological latent forces, including innate instincts, present from birth. In the early days of life, a child's personality structure consists of the id, loaded with instincts. During this period, the child cannot delay, control, or regulate these instincts and is entirely dependent on the caregiver's egos. The ID is the source of psychic energy. It also provides the power necessary for the other two systems to function. Freud called the ED the actual psychic entity. The ego emerges from the need to engage with the real world. It is the ego's job to differentiate the individual's inner world from the outer world. For example, if a person is hungry, they need to find food, which involves distinguishing the image of food in their mind from actual food in the external world. This is the job of the ego. The ego must find the external counterpart of the imagined item. That is, the ego transforms an instinctual energy into an action that provides satisfaction. The ED lacks the ability to make this distinction. For example, a hungry baby will latch onto anything it finds and bring it to its mouth. The ego is the executive branch of personality. It controls the paths to action. It selects which objects in the environment to interact with and decides how to satisfy each instinct. While the ego performs many critical executive functions, it is also tasked with finding a compromise between the conflicting desires of the id and the superego. This is not an easy task and puts the ego in a difficult position. Because the ego is a regulated part of the id, it derives all its power from the id, cannot exist without it, and can never be independent of it. Recent research indicates that a mother or a mother figure meeting a baby's instinctual needs is crucial for healthy ego development. Children deprived of maternal closeness have been observed to have dysfunctional ego operations. Conversely, children whose instinctual needs are excessively met develop weak resistance to frustrations, and their egos cannot achieve the necessary harmony between the desires from the id and the realities of the external world. Thus, the development of the ego in the early life stage is important. The superego is the third and last developed system of personality. It is the internal representative of traditional values and societal ideals, transmitted and reinforced by the parents through rewards and punishments. The superego is the moral and ethical aspect of the personality. Its task is to decide what is right or wrong and to act according to the standards approved by society or its representatives. For example, to be rewarded and avoid punishment, a child internalizes thoughts and behaviors disapproved by their parents into their conscience, a subsystem of the superego. The conscience punishes the individual by making them feel guilty. One of the primary functions of the superego is to suppress impulses from the ID, such as sexual and aggressive drives, which may not be well received when expressed. Another function is to direct the ego from realistic to moral objectives. The superego also strives for perfection. The superego opposes the id and ego, trying to direct them towards its desired order. The ego delays the satisfaction of instinctual desires, while the superego tries to block these desires entirely. In simple terms, the id, ego, and superego are names given to psychological processes operating on different principles. Under normal conditions, these principles do not conflict or work against each other. Under the leadership of the ego, they operate as a team, allowing the personality to function as a whole, not as three separate parts. In a broader sense, the ID can be said to form the biological aspect of our personality, the ego, the psychological aspect, and the superego, the social aspects. So, what is the I? The I is the element that organizes personality along with these processes. Just as the sun is the center of a specific star system, the I is the center of the collective unconscious. A person is performing well in their role as the I when they feel in harmony. Conversely, if a person is in conflict and feels fragmented, it indicates that the I is not fulfilling its role. Every individual's goal is to realize themselves. However, to achieve this goal, one must traverse a long, difficult, and complex path. Therefore, the I becomes more apparent in middle age because the personality has not yet completed its development and individuation before this. For a person to realize themselves, cooperation from the ego is necessary. For the personality to individuate, the person must make all aspects of themselves conscious. If the ego does not respond to the calls of the I and prevents the content of consciousness from reaching the I, the individual is deprived of the opportunity to know themselves. A person is at peace with themselves to the extent that they can make their unconscious world conscious. Because they recognize their unconscious resources, they do not conflict with themselves and are more tolerant towards others. If a person fails to achieve this, they project their disliked unconscious self onto others, criticizing and condemning them. In doing so, they are unaware that they are observing their true inner self. As the I develops, a person strives to know, perceive, and understand themselves better, and puts more effort into directing their life as they wish. In conclusion, for the expected change in human behavior to occur, it is not enough for a person to understand themselves and gain insight. The individual must also translate this insight into constructive action.